Welcome to Tech Simplified. And today I'm continuing the Woman in Tech series. And I got a phenomenal lady. Her name is Portia Isaac. And she's going to share her story, how she got into tech, how she continued to trailblaze, how she is changing the game, and how she continued to be a dynamic woman in tech. Portia, will you please give my audience an introduction to how you got started and let them know a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. Thank you for having me. So my background's a little bit unique. I just got into the tech space about 3 months ago. My background is actually in the energy industry.
Yeah.
I used to sell oil for machinery and vehicles, and I did that for almost 6 years. But I got to my 5-year mark last summer and just started thinking, is this what I want to do? I had been doing it since I was a sophomore in college. That's when I started interning for my previous employer. And it was all I ever knew, right? Like I was 19 when I interviewed and just started to think, do I want to try something else? And if I do, I feel like 5 years is a good time to make that transition. Because if I don't, then I'm, on this trajectory and it'll be a lot harder to pivot, 10 years in versus 5, at least for me. So I turned on open to network on LinkedIn and just thought I'll just see, who reaches out and what companies are out there and talk to some of my friends that left. And I learned about the solution engineering role, which for me, I was a sales engineer previously. So I was on like the technical support side, but there was a lot more sales involved where I was responsible for my pipeline and for growing my business. And I learned about solution engineering where you really are just that technical expert. You're stage 2 and 3, identifying the right solutions, really meeting the customer where they are. You're not trying to really sell them anything. At the end of the day, you just want to understand their business and how you can help support them. And I felt like that was the perfect intersection of my experience and what I really enjoyed about my role. Like that was my favorite part, was being in front of customers and having those conversations and feeling like I'm helping them do their job, more efficiently or more easily. And so I applied, and when I was in the application process, I just applied to anything. Like whoever reached out to me, I did their screeners, I did their interviews because I wasn't sure, you know, what I wanted to do. And I hadn't interviewed since I was 20 years old, and I'm, almost 10 years out from that now. So I just did everything, and I was probably in like 10 different interview processes at one point. And as I got into that a couple months at a time, I finally got to the point where I applied for the Salesforce job, and I said, okay, this is the job that I want. This is like the industry that I want to work in. These are the people I want to work with. I used Salesforce in my previous role and I was obsessed with the product. And so I said, I'm either going to get this job and do this job, or I'm going to just stay at my current role and with my current company and just see where it takes me. But by that point, I had done and seen so many things. And it was like, it's this job or nothing. And so luckily for me, I did get the job in January. So I started in January. So I'm about 3 months in, like I said, and I'm over the moon. So happy to be in this role and at this company.
That's a pretty cool story. That's
Yeah.
exciting. It seemed like it wasn't planned out, but it seemed like you're happy where you are now. I do have a question. So what is your exact title at Salesforce? So for the audience
I
who
am,
doesn't know.
yeah, I'm a senior solution engineer in the RCGC, which is retail and consumer goods industry vertical.
Okay, so I got a couple of questions from your conversation that I think really resonate with our audience. Is that change, career shift? Like, how was it for you? Would you say yourself as more introverted, extrovert, a little bit of both? Or like, was it hard putting yourself out there?
Yeah, so I definitely think I'm an extrovert. There are definitely times where I need to recharge, but I've always been a people person. I love working with people, meeting new people. So I think the hardest part of the transition was just the imposter syndrome, which I know like almost everyone deals with in some sort, but being, from outside of the industry, not being a solution engineer in my previous role, feeling like, how did I end up here? Has definitely been something that I like have battled with over the past few months. But the benefit to me is that I work with amazing people, and everyone has been extremely supportive. And the number one piece of advice I've gotten over and over and over again is to just give yourself grace, that, no one comes into this role, even with 10 years of solution engineering experience or coming from other CG companies or other tech companies, that no one comes in and is just like the best solution engineer that Salesforce has ever seen. So, thankfully, the onboarding has been like extremely structured to the point where I feel like I'm getting the exposure that I need to, I'm getting the practice that I'm needing to, and I'm not live until I've gone through that whole timeline. And so that's been really beneficial for me. But it's been great working with my team and my extended team, and getting up to speed.
That's awesome. I have a similar story that we'll touch on that in a minute, but I have another question for you. So what was your educational experience, and did it help you for your previous jobs and for the job you're doing now?
Sure. Yeah. So I got my Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from
Mhm.
Virginia Tech in 2016. And so I have barely used mechanical engineering like since I
Yeah.
graduated, which I knew probably by my junior year that that was my intent, because I
Mhm.
started interning with my former employer in sales, like sales adjacent roles as a sophomore. So I knew
Yeah.
coming out, as long as I started with them, like I started on this trajectory, I wasn't going to be using thermo for statics or dynamics. But I do think that getting the degree and having to problem solve and understanding like how do you work a problem and use the engineering method has been super beneficial. It's like the best of both worlds. And even in my former role, which was more technical, I was working with engineers, chemical engineers, mechanical engineers in petrochemical plants and paper mills and things of that nature. So it gave me a sense of credibility. And
Yeah.
even in this role now, having an engineering degree and understanding how to work problems in an extremely scientific way is helpful, even if the product that I'm working with is not exactly engines anymore. It's
Yeah.
it's a very different type of product, but I think the skills that I learned and the way that I approach my work and like my problem solving is definitely due to the degree that I got.
Oh yeah, and that's the one thing I was going to highlight is Ellen. I'm pretty sure you're using it, your degree, just not probably in the traditional fashion. Because I just have a lot of friends who have those engineering backgrounds, and the way they look at problems is pretty intriguing. How they go about solving the problem. So for them, it's like, yeah, I never did this before, but I'm so used to solving these complex problems that this is something that is trivial, not trivial,
Yep.
but it's easy. So
Right.
so that's why even when I was doing my IT and marketing background, I started noticing that even all my IT jobs, I'm like, man, they all want an engineering degree, right? And I'm like, it's an IT job, But then I
Right.
realized it was the way that you solve problems, your math skills, and sometimes you need those skills. I remember I'm working on like a data and AI project, and they looking at Calc 3 stuff. I'm like, I only took Calc 1. I don't even know what Calc. I'm like, I have no idea. So I literally had to go back, learn Calc, what I needed, the problem I needed to solve to do it, where someone who probably had your background probably took way past Calc 3. So that would be
Right.
something that they didn't even have to teach you, right? So that's those transferable skills that I like to highlight on this channel is if you in that transition, your transferable skills might not exactly align, but indirectly it's benefiting you. So that's awesome.
Absolutely.
And then when or if you choose to add on some additional business skills that you're already probably picking up along the way in your sales jobs, and if you ever thought to get an MBA or a master's in business, this would probably be another thing that it'll be another differentiator for you. So that's like for me, I took the other way around. I started taking more tech degrees, certifications. I started taking a little bit more engineering classes online, a little bit more math classes on the back end. So then, my marketing background and my IT background now gives me another area to fortify the skill set that I have so I could be a little bit more marketable to find new roles. So that's fantastic. I got another question for you is just on that same vein. In terms of mechanical engineering degree, how did you get there? Did someone tell you to get there? Did you know in high school you wanted to get there? Was it, did you see a lot of women in that degree as well? And if not, how did you deal with that?
Yeah, so no, not at all. There were not a lot of women, especially not a lot of women of color. And so I was really good at math and science in high school, and I enjoyed those classes. I thought I would just get a business degree. That's where my head was at again, because I liked working with people. I liked problem solving. I liked the concept of business, but didn't really know what specifically in business I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So my mom actually, she was in human resources for the Department of Energy, the National Energy Technology Lab in Pittsburgh, where I grew
Yeah.
up. And so her whole job was hiring engineers. And she was the one that encouraged me. She brought me into work and always brought me to bring your child to work day and
Yeah.
was like, come meet these engineers, look at what they're doing. Like, it's really interesting. Like, we need more women, we need more women of color, and you can do this. Like, you're good at this, you enjoy this.
Yeah.
So she was the one that like suggested that I consider engineering, and that again that I could always decide to do something different, but
Yeah.
at a minimum, it's job security to have an engineering degree, and so she was the one that really had me consider it, and
Yeah.
I went and I really did enjoy my time at Virginia Tech and enjoyed getting my degree and
Yeah.
learning those skills. But like I said, I knew pretty early on that it was going to be for the base problem solving skills versus
Yeah.
an exact career path. But to answer your question about the diversity, yeah, there wasn't actually. Mechanical engineering is the biggest degree at Virginia Tech. We have the most graduates, or we did in 2016, and I think it was like 300 of us, and I was the only Black woman in my
Wow.
graduating class. So it was humbling being in that degree and being in that college, and you find your people. I was in the National Society of Black Engineers, is super super involved, and so even though they weren't in mechanical engineering, like I did have my tribe, and found my people. But it definitely again goes back to like, do I really belong here? Looking up to people and finding those people that look like me. They just didn't exist. And so
Yeah.
that's a huge thing for me now, is ensuring that anyone who comes behind me also feels like, even if you don't look like anyone in the room, that you belong in that
Yeah.
room. Is huge for me.
That's huge. And I commend you, and shout out to your mom for exposing you early. That's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
My parents gave me my first computer at like 7, and I fell in
Wow.
love. That was my first love. I joke with my wife. That's my first love, right?
Yeah.
My Windows 95, fixing it, breaking it, playing video games. I had not Xbox, so the Sega Genesis and Nintendo. I was always fascinated setting it up, putting the different parts together. It was really cool. And then once they realized I had the love for it, they kept feeding into it. Like, they give me books, bring me to the library, read about it, encyclopedias on computers, and they gave me something like the Scholastics, I think it was called. And I remember it was Face ID before Face ID came out. Like, that was going to be the future. Then it was like solar power houses wasn't a thing yet, so that was going to be the future. Like, it is cool. Like, I got to read about all that stuff, and I would spend hours. But anyway, yeah, my parents definitely exposed me indirectly, because they didn't even know. They just got a computer.
Mm-hmm.
Someone gave it to them, and then I just fell in love, right? And then I just kept learning everything I could about it. And then even when I went to the University of Buffalo in tech, it's probably, I don't think there was anyone else as a person of color there that was in
Right.
tech. There was a lot of my friends in business, which I was cool with, and I'm still cool with today. But I was the only tech person, Black person, that was at in the University of Buffalo that I can recall. And it was a pretty fair, like a graduating class of the business school was 1,200. Tech probably had to be like 300 to 400 people. And I'm pretty sure I was the only one there in the tech. And I did marketing. It was a few more people of color in marketing. So that
Yeah.
was one thing that even now I go back to the school, I'm still in Buffalo, and I make sure that I go and talk to the students, because I meet a lot of kids that didn't know they can do these things. And then I can kind of help them overcome some of those imposter syndromes, because I definitely got it when I came to Microsoft or even my technology consulting roles. But luckily, I was afforded a lot of mentors that looked like myself. I remember it
Mm-hmm.
was a lady that I actually interviewed, Cheryl Thompson, that was one of the senior technology consultant at Ingram Micro. She's still there, and she was at IBM, and she used to coach me along, right? And I had so many people I can recall that made it So because sometimes you need to know if something is tangible, if you could see someone that is in the spot that you want to be at, right? So that was definitely cool. So I definitely commend you on that. So this perfectly ties into the next question. What advice would you give yourself earlier in your career, if any?
Yeah. So I think there's two things. One, exactly what you just said, was finding that sponsor, that mentor, the people that I could have, a safe space with, like as early as possible. I did that probably 2, 3, 4 years in, but if I did it again, it would be like a day one goal of mine was to reach out to the people that I know I could trust, and I felt like I could have conversations on, I don't see any, Black women at level 3, level 4. Like, why is that? Like, how do I become that level 3, level 4 leader? And put effort into that, day one. Um, and then number two, this one's big for me, is feeling like I could bring my full self to work,
Yeah.
and if I felt like I couldn't do that, that maybe that was not somewhere that I needed to be. I think that that's made a huge difference in my decision to break into tech in at year 5, was that I wanted to be in an industry that was talking about diversity and talking about, burnout, and talking about the things that were important to me. And um, I think that I probably waited too long to feel really comfortable in my own skin in the workplace. And some of that was on me. Like, it wasn't like there was not an environment for that. When I finally do that, it was very well received. It was, it went over extremely well. We had conversations within my part of the organization that, changed me as a person, and I think changed a lot of the people that were on the calls, and it went really well. But I was so afraid, and it took me 4 years to really say out loud, like, these things happen in our workplace, and, you're not considering this when working with employees of color or women in the workplace. And I was afraid to do that and have those conversations. And I think that if I did it again, like, that would be a huge thing for me, is that you have to be comfortable in your own skin, in both in and outside of the workplace, because it makes you a better employee when you're able to really, when you're not like code switching at all times, and trying to be someone that you're not. You can't really give your all and really give all the effort, because it's exhausting to have to do that. So that's a big one for me.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I feel like that's something that's not talked as much. It's just feeling
Hmm.
comfortable, right? And it took me to later in my career to feel comfortable. I never used to share people I was from Barbados,
Hmm.
because it was first of all, most people don't know where is Barbados. So they usually, sometimes I get the silly things. What is? I'm like, it's a place.
Yeah.
And then, I usually have to go through, it's not Jamaica. It's similar. It's a Caribbean island. So you got
Right.
something there, right? And then usually I feel like I would alienate myself when I used to say those things. So, I just say I'm from Brooklyn, because it was just
Hmm.
easier. People know Brooklyn. It was easier. But I got to a point like I didn't care. You're going to accept me for who I am. I'm not the traditional tech person probably, because I do open mic nights, poetry, write books. I'm a little bit more outgoing. Like, how come you can speak so for like, all techs, we can speak too, right? Just, that's just wasn't portrayed on TV, right? Or, being myself as, just a natural Caribbean American person, right? Things I like to do, to eat, like I just felt, like you said, more comfortable in my skin and being myself and being able to share those things. So like one thing that drew me to Microsoft is not only do they talk about diversity and inclusion, I see it within the leadership. I see it
Hmm.
within the various groups that we have in. Like I'm a part of the Blacks at Microsoft, BAM, Hispanics at Microsoft, not Hispanic, but I get to join the industrious people, indigenous people of America. They got a group for that. I mean, pretty much anything you could think of. There's a group active
Right.
participating, and where they solving real problems where you could feel comfortable on there, right? And I was even on call like when it was like Africans at Microsoft, and they was playing like reggae, African hip hop on the call, taking donations to help people who look like us, right? So I thought that was pretty cool, because I've been at companies where they talk about it, but then you look inside the leadership, you don't see anyone that looks like you. So like, hey, you tell me I can make this, but is it really possible? Do
Right.
I want to spend the time trying to break that barrier to be that first person? Or do I go somewhere where, I could just become that, right? It's like that question. But that was really valid. And that I'm glad that you found that inner voice and brought it out, right? Because now you get to be your full self. Because one thing I realized, every time that you have to code switch or be someone a little bit different, you lose a little bit of yourself each time you do it. And sometimes it's hard to get that person back. At least I found for myself. I think you touched on this already. What's your passion? If there's the only one thing you want to do, what would it be?
Yeah, so I think my passion is leaving any situation I'm in better than I found it.
Okay.
And especially as it relates to people and women of color, just ensuring that everyone feels that they belong in whatever space that they want to be in. That's been a huge thing for me since college. I was always involved in mentoring programs and summer camps for girls in engineering, and now in my former career, and ensuring people had like doing interview prep and resume reviews back at Virginia Tech and with the National Society of Black Engineers. And that's just huge for me. And I think it's a huge gap. It's something that Salesforce is very vocal about and has the numbers and, like you said, the action behind talking about it. But they're also looking to double the amount of Black leaders in the organization. And they've already met goals that they set for like 2025, I believe, and getting more than 50% underrepresented employees. Like they've already done that. And so that's a huge thing for me. Is it's my number one, just ensuring that no matter what people want to do, and even if it's not engineering, right? Like I'm passionate about people and people of color feeling comfortable in engineering, but even if it's something else, just ensuring that anyone feels like they belong in those spaces and that they're more than capable to do whatever they want to.
Okay, that's awesome. And I guess for you is, what have you found when you've been mentoring, students or prospective students who want to get into engineering? What's the main obstacle do you find? And the reason why I ask that is because I know when I go through that, when I ask those questions and say, I didn't even know I could do this. Or for myself, I can tell you, I didn't even know sales engineering, solution engineering was a thing, right?
Right.
I hold on, I can get paid to talk about technology. I've been doing this for free for years, so like, I didn't even know there was a career for that,
Right.
So I guess from your experience, what have you seen one of the biggest obstacles?
Yeah, I think exposure is probably the biggest, is not having maybe access to those people. I'm a lot of people that I interned with or grew up in my formal company with, like their uncles or their dad or their neighbor worked at the company, and so that was their introduction. Whereas like my introduction was I randomly talked to someone at a career fair and I got lucky and that we had a good conversation. So I think exposure is a big one. And so that's why I get involved with either like after school sessions or panels at high schools or anything like that with NSB or any other groups, just sharing that is an option for them. And then there's also a confidence piece when you don't have that exposure, when you don't have, maybe parents that did that. Even my mom got me into engineering, but again, she wasn't an engineer herself. So there was a lot of still things that I had to kind of figure out on my own. And I couldn't go home and be like, hey, can you help me with my statics homework? And so there's a confidence piece that is sometimes missing if you don't have access to those people. And so that's another one that we do, like especially with interview prep and resume prep, is just kind of building that confidence up and saying like, hey, you're doing great. This is your first time interviewing. We were talking like I did like a sophomore girls interview prep session, and we did I think like 6 rounds. And so you could tell like round one, they are like petrified to be having these conversations. But by round six, like they've had this conversation 6 times. They know they've gotten some coaching. They know the things that they should highlight. They know the things that they should skip. And so I think that's another one is which comes with exposure, right? But just building that confidence and ensuring that ensuring someone that's maybe not been exposed to it that they can, And that practice really does make perfect. And the more that you try something, the better that you get at it.
Yeah, that muscle memory and being hands-on, right? That's one thing I found. It's good for us to have this conversation. But I realized to get to the people who actually need it, you got to get hands-on. You got to actively reach out to them because they don't even know to reach out to look for this, right? So that's one thing I've been finding. Like, all right, I want to help. Since I'm a girl dad, I'm gonna help, girls of color just like her, right? And others, but I'm like, they ain't looking for this channel, right? They ain't looking for these videos. So how do I go meet them where they are? So that's something I've been doing now is just reaching out, talking to high school students. And now I'm gonna start proactively, like I'm creating a website just that has my portfolio of what I do. So then I can send that to principals and say, hey, I want to talk to the students and this is what I can provide. And this is the value behind it. And this is how I think I can help. So then I can be more proactive at reaching out and helping more people that I think that, and it's great in that exposure because sometimes I realize I won't be the person that makes the impact, but I'm the person that opened the door for them to know what's possible. Right. And then because I found so many people that I grew up with that they didn't really directly help me, but they helped me enough to let me know like there was a better way, or there is a way, or maybe you should look at this, right? And I found that is just as powerful because as long as they get there, I don't really matter if it was me doing it or if it was something else, or someone else. So I like to say is it's great to talk to people, but sometimes you can't get access to that. And all you got access to is books or maybe podcasts. So do you have any books or podcasts that really spoke to you?
Yeah, sure. So I discovered Brene Brown in 2020. Someone recommended a podcast of hers to me. It was her episode with Austin Channing Brown, who wrote the book I'm Still Here, Black Dignity in a World Made for Whiteness. So the book is incredible, but the podcast is one of my favorite podcast episodes of all time. And from there, I've started listening to all of Brene Brown's podcasts, and I really love them. She's really big on vulnerability and really like being able to accept, our flaws and the things that recognize what we are doing and how we can be better and that being okay, which I really love. And then also I love Adam Grant. So any Adam Grant book, Give or Take, is a really good one. And I'm in the middle of reading his newest book, but those would be two that I would recommend.
I saw something. I read at Microsoft, we had a book club and they brought up Dare to Lead. And we collectively as an org, we had to read it and we had breakout rooms where we had to talk about it. And I realized so many times I was putting up like these shields or I was hardening myself to, if I like, well, Portia doesn't like me. But, well, Sly, you might be intimidated because she has a mechanical engineering degree and you don't even know it, right? So it's not Portia, it's actually myself, right? And then just being vulnerable, like opening up. Or I don't want to show Portia that I don't know something, so I won't ask her. But only person that hurts is you, myself, and the customer, right? So just get out your comfort zone and go talk to her. And just learn it from right there. So Brene Brown was pretty cool. I learned a lot. And she was on like Oprah's Super Soul Sunday, which I thought was fantastic. I definitely had a lot of deep questions I had to ask myself. And I catch myself when I'm putting up that armor, when I'm putting up that I'm not letting myself maybe experience something new because I'm holding on to past, bad experiences that I'm afraid that's going to happen again, but I don't know. Right. So, yeah, Brene Brown is definitely a solid one. And I make sure to put that in the show notes. So, Portia, this has been a phenomenal conversation, very candid. I love how you opened up and you was vulnerable on this conversation. I don't want it to end, but it has to end right now. So before I let it end, how can my audience contact you if they want some mentorship, if they want to ask you some questions? Where should they go?
Yes, definitely find me on LinkedIn. It's Portia Isaac. I'm sure it'll be in the title of the podcast so you can see the spelling. It's not like the car. But yeah, find me on LinkedIn. Definitely please connect with me. Send me a message. I'm always looking to help out however I can. So I would love that.
Well, that was fantastic. Well, until next time, Sly Gittens and Portia are out. Peace.